Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. We're now live on YouTube. When you're ready, Chair, would you like to start the meeting?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual Strategic Planning Committee, 12th of July 2022. I'm your Chair, Councillor Paul Arnott. Based on the decision of the Council to continue virtual meetings until the 31st of October this year, may I remind members and the public attending or watching that this Council has delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers. We will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our Constitution. In the event of a break in the internet connection, we will try and get a connection, but if after 15 minutes that hasn't worked, we will have to reconvene at a later date. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand, wait to be called. Members of the public can find this agenda at eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting with a roll call of committee members done by our DSO, Wendy, please.
Thank you. I'll start with you, Chair. So, Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair, Councillor Davey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'm here, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Howe.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor Ledger.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Moulding. Councillor Pratt. Councillor Rylance. Councillor Skinner.
He'd be here, yes. And I would just like to say that Councillor Ingham can't make it. Thank you. Tender his apology.
Yes, I've got his apologies. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. So, Chair, we are correct for today's meetings. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Wendy. Can I just apologise for a slightly breathless reading of the opening remarks earlier? I just sprinted up 2 flights of stairs, having got a drink, and was slightly caught short. So apologies for that. I'm not in any form of about to have any kind of cardiac arrest. So going now to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 1, public speaking. And I can see Mr. Andy Roberts is there, who is our only registered speaker for today. And I understand he wishes to talk about the HELAR assessments presented to strategic planning on the 3rd of May. So 3 minutes, Mr. Roberts. You'll get a slightly off-putting warning 30 seconds from time telling you that you're 30 seconds from time, but plough on regardless, please. And if you go over 3 minutes a little bit, that's fine. So over to you, please, Mr. Roberts.
Okay, good morning, members of the committee and officers. I'd like to draw your attention to the HELAR assessments made to the 6 sites in Northeast Exmouth, Exmo 4, 12 and Lympstone 9, 10, 14 and 15, as presented to the Strategic Planning Committee on the 3rd of May of this year. Despite the considerable work that's no doubt been carried out, I note that the quality of much of the narrative has been undermined by the extensive use of cut and paste of the same comments, and that there are numerous errors where the comments have been truncated, so it's not possible to see the full narrative. It's clear to me that several of the sites failed to meet one of the 5 suitability tests needed to move to stage B, namely, is the site an unacceptable distance from a reasonable range of services and facilities? This test is that the site should be within 1,600 metres or a mile from 4 services or more. The HELAR assessments conclude that all 6 sites meet this criteria. I believe that only 4 of those sites have less than the 4 services, and the other 2 only just meet the criteria with 5 services. As an example, Lympstone 15 and 10 are over a mile away from the nearest supermarket, secondary school, library, hospital, leisure centre, swimming pool, emergency services facility, train station, convenience store, post office, primary school, pub, GP, community hall, allotments, children's play area and sports playing facility. The only facility that's within the 1 mile is the one hourly bus service that goes from the corner of Dean and Way. And I would be more than happy to organise what I would call the Walk of Terror down Hoham Road from Lympstone 10 to 15 to the nearest bus stop for any committee member or officer. If you attend, please bring a high visibility jacket for your own safety. I can't believe that any site visits have been made by EDDC officers or members of the Heller panel, as any visit would clearly show how unsuitable these sites are. So I would ask EDC to provide the evidence that they've used for the 6 sites, showing the distances
30 seconds remaining.
Nearest services from the centre of each of these sites. Check and correct the many truncation errors in the site assessment document and amend the sites that don't meet the suitability criteria in the listing of Heller sites. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Excellent timing there. If I can, just to give you a bit of time. So after this, you'll be put back into the lobby, so to speak, but you'll be able to continue to watch the meeting on YouTube. So that may be something you want to play with while we ask Ed Freeman to comment on what you just said. Ed, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to members. I mean, I think the couple of key points I'd make in response is one in terms of the distances that's referred to. I don't know exactly what methodology has been used, but we've been going from the edge of sites rather than the centre of sites, which I think Mr. Roberts referred to. So we may be using a different methodology there. I think the other thing I'd stress is that obviously the HELAR report is quite a high level, largely desk-based assessment, and we're currently doing more detailed site assessment work, which is referred to within the agenda and will be brought to you in future meetings. So some of that more qualitative work and site assessment work is ongoing at the moment, and will be coming to members in due course. The HELAR report that was brought to previous meeting is also only a draft. There's further HELAR work going on, particularly with regard to the additional sites that came forward in the further call for sites, with a final report coming to members in October, which will then go out to consultation alongside the draft plan. And it's at that point that we'll be sort of seeking views on that work, and obviously welcome Mr. Roberts' comments at that time so that they can be taken on board through the formal consultation process. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ed. Can I just bowl you a slightly curveball here? I think one of Mr. Roberts' principal concerns was this issue about where in the site it's measured from, and I think he's hoping for the middle, and we're talking about the edge. What's the sort of standard practice on that?
I don't think there's any right or wrong necessarily. I think each have their merits. I suppose if you go from the centre of the site, then you know I think the key point here really, I suppose, is in terms of the HELAR report, we've gone from the edge of the site as the criteria, but through the qualitative work, we need to obviously look at other factors, including how accessible those facilities are in reality. I think Mr. Roberts made the point of the actual route for accessing those services perhaps isn't that attractive, and that's obviously an important consideration alongside the distance. And obviously sometimes where you have a large site, whether you go from the edge of the site or the centre of the site could make a difference, but in a lot of cases it won't make a great deal of difference. So these are all kind of nuances that need to come out in the wash, I think, as we get into those detailed site assessment work in future meetings. Hopefully that helps, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Roberts, thank you very much for your question this morning. I think the DSOs will now put you in some kind of limbo, but do please carry on watching on YouTube if you'd like, and thank you again. Okay, we now go on to agenda item 2, the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 7th of June 2022, found on pages 3 to 8. If anyone has any comments on these minutes, please could you raise your electronic hand? But if I see nobody has raised them, I will take this as an indication you're happy for the minutes to be noted. So no hands, so those are duly noted. Thank you very much indeed. Can we go back to Wendy, please, now to confirm apologies?
Yes, I've received 3 apologies. So Councillor Hayward, Councillor Pook, and this morning I've received apologies from Councillor Moulding, who's having internet problems.
Okay, thank you. Can I offer apologies that I've received directly from Councillor Sarah Chamberlain as well, please? Who will be back to full council work on the 18th, I'm delighted to say. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest, and that's back to you, please, Wendy.
Thank you. Can I start with you, Councillor Arnott?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
None, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Allen?
None, Wendy, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
I'm a county councillor, but I don't think that qualifies as one anymore, so none.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey?
Done, thanks, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Howe?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence?
None, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Ledger?
None that I'm aware of, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. I am expecting Councillor Pratt. He is having a few issues getting in, so I've resent him the link, so hopefully he'll join us shortly. Councillor Rylance, welcome. Do you have any declarations?
I do not. No, nothing to declare. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Skinner.
None, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
That was lovely, a clear round. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for that. Agenda item 5 would be matters of urgency, and there are no matters of urgency to discuss today. Agenda item 6 would be confidential or exempt items. There are none. So we go straight to agenda item 7, which is the busiest item for today, I suppose, which is the East Devon local plan with an update on the timetable for production, which you'll find on pages 9 to 17. And we have Ed Freeman here to present his report. Thanks, Ed, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report follows on from a number of previous reports members have had in terms of the timetable for production of the new local plan, site assessment work, and potential presentations from site promoters and developers. And this report seeks to sort of update members on the timetable and where we've got to with that work and some of the challenges that were faced over the coming months, really. So I think previously we'd reported that we would start to bring to you site assessment work through the Strategic Planning Committee from this meeting, actually. As you see, that hasn't been possible. This is primarily because of the additional call for sites and the sites that came forward through that. You'll see from the report that 150 sites came forward in that additional call for sites, which then obviously need to be processed through our systems and then go through the assessment process. So that's increased the workload in terms of the site assessment work. And they also need to go through the HELAR process and panel before October as well. And also at some point we need to fit in the site promoters and developers presentations that members had previously committed to as well. So the current timetable that we're proposing through this report is to bring forward site assessments on the main towns through your next meeting in August, followed by tiers 3 and 4 in assessment hierarchy in September, and the remainder at the October meeting alongside a draft plan for consultation. So an alternative to this would obviously be to bring everything forward in one group of site assessment work in October. However, we feel that that would be a massive workload for members to try and undertake all in one meeting, or indeed 1 month. It would obviously have to be a number of meetings in that time, and is obviously putting all of that decision making right at the tail end of that period, when we need to go out to consultation by mid-October if we are to complete a full consultation exercise in plenty of time before Christmas. So section 3 of the report sets out some of the key issues that are now informing that work in terms of the further assessment of work that's taking place and how we're moving that forward from the initial assessments that members saw late last year, early this year. It's envisaged that through that process we'll try and identify sites that are in our minds definite proposed allocations for the consultation, alongside those are definitively not proposed for allocation, and there will be a small number of sites we think that will sort of be in the middle of that are have potential but are quite challenging, that we may need to give further consideration to once members have seen all of the site assessment work together to understand any shortfalls and how those might be addressed. As I mentioned, there's also this ongoing issue with the HELAR panel and how we bring that work to a conclusion in terms of taking into account the additional sites that come forward in the further call for sites and complete the HELAR report for that consultation exercise in October. So the revised timetable poses a number of challenges in terms of the workload of committee over the coming months and how that all fits together alongside potentially any presentations from site promoters and developers that members will recall committing to at previous meetings. So section 6 in the report starts to consider in detail some of those issues and asks a series of questions that members are asked to consider. So to just quickly run through those, the first is whether committee want to extend the invitation to make presentations to all agents and landowners to be promoting land for development at the towns. Members will recall that you heard some presentations earlier in the year from those sites that were sort of mid-scoring, I think it was, within the initial assessment work that had been undertaken. But I think there was some inclination, some criticism of that, so we say, from developers and site promoters that didn't get the opportunity to present through that. And I think some sympathy from members in a subsequent meeting in terms of that. So whether or not we want to open that invitation more broadly or continue to narrow the scope of that down is something we'd appreciate some advice from members on. The second question is about whether committee wish to hear presentations at the same committee meeting at which officer site assessments are heard. So this could be broken down in terms of whether or not they come together or whether or not you want the site assessments beforehand and time to sort of read and digest those before you hear the presentations, or the opposite way round. And also how we break those sessions up in terms of a series of meetings. So our committee happy to have town-based presentations at extra committee meetings in August. I think it's unlikely, if we're bringing the site assessment work for the main towns in August, that could be done in a single meeting. But I don't know what members' availability is through August, usually a month where we wouldn't usually have extra committee meetings, or indeed many committees not meeting at all during that month. So members' advice on the acceptability of additional meetings during August to facilitate that work would be helpful. As would some guidance as to whether or not committee would wish to have a series of meetings where they consider officer assessment on one or two towns only, and then agents and landowners presentations for sites at those towns. How would that work in terms of the sequencing of those presentations alongside the assessment work? We could potentially have 2 or 3 meetings during August focused around particular towns where members see officers' presentation of our site assessment work alongside the presentations, or that could be kept more separate, depending on how members see that working. So we would appreciate members' views on those questions. And if I just go back to the sort of main recommendations at the start of the report, the first, I think, is simply to note the content of the report. Members are recommended to endorse the proposed timetables for bringing officer assessments of potential development sites to committee as set out in section 4. So really this is the option of bringing them in tranches, so the main towns in August, tier 3 and 4 settlements in September, and the remainder in October is the recommendation. And the third recommendation is that Strategic Planning Committee make recommendations about the questions I've outlined in section 6 of the report in terms of the presentation of officers' site assessments and the hearing of presentations from developers and site promoters. Hopefully that's clear, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Just before we start, can I ask members of the Strategic Planning Committee, by means of raising a yellow hand, how many of you have got plans for holiday, formal annual leave holiday during August? Would you mind just putting your hands up? Because I can't see. How many is that, Wendy? Is that only 2?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands up, and including yours, 6.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, well, that's useful to know. Yes, I see. Thank you. Okay, so have it all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's gone to 6 actually now. People being reminded of their luxury villas in Tuscany, perhaps, or their beach hut in Southend. So, okay, that's useful to know. Can we then come first, please, to any members not on the committee for any comments on this item, please? And now then, I think Bruce, well, I think that gives me Councillor Young and Councillor Desarum first. So Councillor Young first, please.
Thank you, Chair. As Ward Councillor for Lympstone and Woodbury, I'd just like to make a couple of comments about Mr. Roberts' comments. I tend to agree with most of his points. Most of the sites are at the top of a hill, and great going down the hill to catch the bus, but not very good at walking back with a whole load of shopping. There's no pavements along there at the moment, and there are safety issues on that road. It's a very dangerous road. So I do support a lot of the residents' concerns about that area. Regarding this report, now there is a perception that the local plan is just about providing more dwellings, and this report does seem to confirm that, because we're just talking about development after development after development. In my patch of Woodbury and Lympstone, there is a mass of proposed sites. Obviously, local people are concerned, and both the parish councils have arranged drop-in sessions with their residents. These were to demonstrate that the parish councils are listening, and also for the parish council to gauge public perception on both the sites, all the sites coming forward, plus their views on what is their thoughts on how the area should be developed. Not just development of the buildings, but also protecting the remaining countryside. Lympstone residents do not seem to favour any further development at all. And I can understand their feelings about their closeness to Exmouth and the 350 houses that are being developed at Goodmore's Farm, which is right on their boundary. Woodbury do accept that they would be required to contribute to the housing, but they also recognise that there is a balance for more housing, plus the added benefits for protecting the remaining countryside. Now, both Lympstone and Woodbury have done reports, and they have been or will be one's been sent to officers and to some councillors, and another report is going to be sent today. So I hope we can consider these issues, not only on development, but also the protecting the existing countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Coming to Councillor Bruce Desarum next, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chair. I note from reading the report in section 2.1 that we are not dealing with the final plan here. However, I note that this report indicates the council have now reached a favoured direction of travel. And I note in point 4 about the Exmouth and Axminster and the various 6 towns. And I hope that when that is done, that adequate time is given to go through the towns like Exmouth in great detail, because I think it's about convincing the public that the final plan has met with their approval in terms of the consultation that has been undertaken, and I hope that the committee can spend quite a considerable time on all of these towns that is in this list about considering the possible sites. I think that's a really important thing to do, so that people feel that the plan has been listened to and taken on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Desarum. That's all from outside of committee that I can see. I'm just going to take a little diversion at this point while members outside the committee are still here. I think I forgot to ask those members present who are not on strategic planning to go through the declaration of interest. So can I just ask Wendy, could you take those members through that, please, that you can see on screen?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so likewise with committee members, I do have to ask for other members if they have any declarations. So from my list, I've got Councillor Cahill. Do you have any declarations?
No, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Young?
No, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Desarum?
No, only as touched on earlier, Exmouth Town Council, but other than that, no actual declarations. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Rickson?
None to declare, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland?
None, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Kemp?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Faithful?
None, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. Welcome to Councillor Pratt to the meeting. Can I just check if you have any declarations for today's meeting?
No, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone. If I have, please do say. Brilliant. Okay, back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely, good bit of housekeeping. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, now coming to the members of committee in the order I can see them on the screen. Councillor Philip Skinner, please.
Thank you. And just reverting back to the questions of what Mr. Freeman was asking regarding whether or not how we go forward with presentations coming forward. I'm very much in support of having all of the presentations coming forward, because I'm not quite sure how we actually engage with understanding what they all are if they don't actually come to us and make a presentation. And I do also understand and appreciate that those site owners or presentation that were done previously, for those who didn't have the opportunity to bring their presentation of their sites forward, they felt perhaps a little bit miffed at missing out on their opportunity of promoting their particular sites. And I think we need to be seen to be playing fair play with everybody coming forward, and then whether we decide on them or not decide on them will be our decision. But at least what we have done, we've had a level playing field. We've offered everybody the opportunity to come and make their presentations, and then it would be up to us as a strategic planning committee to decide if we want to give advice to the or guidance to the officers in the way that we're going forward with those particular applications. So I think it's fundamentally important, Chair, that all these applications come forward and that the presentations are offered to all. The caveat, of course, I do have is what you suggested earlier, Chair, and you were quite right to mention that. I mean, August is going to be a difficult time. So if we're going to be ramping through getting the particular towns and the particular applications in, and there's going to be a large number of them, we have to do one or two things. Either many members are going to be missing, which doesn't seem quite right either, because otherwise it's not a fair representation of what that is. So I'll leave this to you, Chair. As I say, you're going to manage this one. And of course, the other is it's if we extend it and extend our path of travel to be a little longer to ensure we have fair play. And it's a difficult balance to make, and I understand that and I appreciate what other members may have to say. But I do think two things are very important. One is that everybody gets the ability to have their presentation, and two, that as many members as possible. And I get the fact that perhaps some people can't, one or two on the way, as is today, for example. Things crop up and that happens. But in the general, I wouldn't like to think there was a big presentation and we would only, for instance, Chair, you only just Cora, or for instance, you were away and you weren't chairing it. And you know, it's quite difficult. The only thing you have in your armament is, because we are on Zoom, which I not particularly happy with, because I'd sooner be face to face, but we are on Zoom. And if we are away, we may be able to, wherever we are, join into a meeting. There is that possibility that may work, but it's a difficult one. But that's where I sit, and I think we need to be seen to be given the main thrust of my view is that we need to be seen to be given fair play to everybody in their presentations and coming forward. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. I'll give you my wife's mobile number, if that's okay, to explain that I might be zooming in from holiday in August and see how that goes. That said, I suspect that what Phil has said is likely to be what most of us are going to say. So, I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I suspect that that's the direction of travel here. Ed, can I just ask you, that first week in September, for example, I mean, can we create for ourselves a week of hell of some kind, or maybe the first week in August, first week in September? I mean, how much wriggle room do you have at your end within the schedule that we're wanting to keep to?
I mean, I think as officers, I think we were nervous about bringing everything all in one go, hence trying to spread it out through August and September. Obviously, the August sites can be carried over into September, but I don't think we can bring forward what we were intending to bring in September to an earlier date, if you see what I mean, because we're going through and doing site assessments on the basis of working our way down the settlement hierarchy. So we've started off with the main towns, we're just finishing off assessment of those, and then we'll move to the sites in tiers 3 or 4 and downwards. So certainly if members didn't want to have those meetings in August, we could pack September with the meetings to cover off the main towns and the tiers 3 and 4 settlements all in 1 month. But that will be quite intensive, I suspect, and could need at least perhaps 3 or 4 meetings in that month.
So would we be able to perhaps front load as much as we can in the early part of August? And would that then make it a little bit more comfortable to do that extra work in early September as well? Can you imagine that working, or does that not fit with the line of assessments as they're currently being done?
Well, if members are around for the scheduled August meeting, then it would be useful to keep that in the diary and have at least some of the sites at that meeting, on the basis that that's at least a date that's in members' diaries and has been hopefully for some time. And if it's not possible to have further meetings in August, we could set up a number of further meetings in September to make up for that.
So we could do, members of the committee, we could do a sort of bit of a whopper on was it the 12th of August, or Ed, I can't remember that first meeting.
I can assist. It's the 9th. Yes, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Yeah, no. So the 9th. So we could sort of try and nip through whatever other agenda items they were, and try and make that a primary sort of presentation day. Then see if we can try not to do something in the latter part of August, which is where I suspect people may not be around so much. And then anyway, those are just floating those as thoughts, but not to. Councillor Jess Bailey, please, next.
Thank you. Yeah, I am concerned, and I personally, my direction of travel might be slightly different to everybody else's, but I fear that these developer presentations are kind of, I just actually feel that they're not fundamental to getting our local plan out to consultation. And I'm worried that our agenda, the timetable, I think, is very tight already. So, for instance, to have a meeting at which I think on the 4th of October, I think I'm right in thinking that meeting will be discussing the sites at the edge of Exeter and looking at the draft plan before it goes out to consultation. And I think that's going to be really difficult to address all of that in one meeting. I'm also concerned that individual meetings to discuss all our towns, as we're proposing to do, I think on the 9th of August, it's a lot for a single meeting. So I think we need to kind of recognise, so if our priority has to be, I think, getting our local plan out to consultation, and we haven't really got much slippage because potentially, well, not potentially, there is an election next year, there will be purdah. And if we have any slippage, we're going to miss that timetable and we're not going to get to go out to consultation before purdah starts. And my fear is that through these developer presentations, it's just adding in one extra layer of complications that actually, I'm sorry if the developers are miffed, as Councillor Skinner said, but actually, is it fundamental? I don't believe it is, and I'm worried that as members, as it is, we've barely got enough time in those meetings to talk about really important issues, and actually, it's just heaping an extra layer of complexity into scheduling meetings, whereas actually we need to be keeping our time free so that if there is any slippage from those meetings that we've got already scheduled in, and I do agree with the timetable put forward by Ed, but I think we need to recognise that we may not have enough time in those meetings to cover the business as it is. And I just feel that, we're in danger of shoehorning in these extra developer presentations. And I think I've said this before, but what I would really like to see is if, by all means, have presentations, but put it in writing, and then we can look at it in our own time, in the luxury of, of our own time, if we're on holiday, if we're, at home. And I just feel it's really, really difficult to then have meetings to do that as well as doing everything else. So my fear is that we're going to see our timetable slip, and then we're going to miss the window, the small window that we have got, because actually we've already got masses and masses of things to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I think we're hearing you there as well. Part of this would have to be about how the discipline that we encourage the developers or owners or whatever. Do you remember there was somebody did a PowerPoint presentation with pictures of houses and cats and stuff, and we just can't have that again. And I think Councillor Bailey's absolutely right. I think we would need good, clear, 3-page written evidence prior to the meeting, and then perhaps 5 minutes of the people talking and 5 minutes of us questioning them. And I think that would have to be enough. So coming next, please, to Councillor Mike Allen.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is that we're getting into a very mechanical, process-driven approach instead of a proper consultation and a considered set of judgments. And one of the particular concerns I continually have, and I've asked you to back me in a previous proposal on this, which you agreed to, is the issue of disability and accessibility inside homes and the design of homes so that people can move around in wheelchairs. Nowhere in the agenda and nowhere in the investigation is there any interest shown in the disabled cohorts. Now, we've got integrated care on the agenda that's very definitely going ahead. That implies that there will be more domestic frailty and care, And that means that in addition to people who are disabled, there will be more people recovering at home and usually finding it difficult to move around after operations. So I think that in view of the trend of the age profile of East Devon, we really do need a report and a proper study on the implications and the responses to homes, not care homes, but normal domestic housing, and what the attitude and policies of this council will be in terms of asking for particular designs of those dwellings. What proportion are we going to ask for? We are willing to have good debates on the issue of affordable homes, but we totally miss this issue of care inside the home. And that's the whole trend of government policy. It's been neglected. It is inside the NPPF that we are supposed to do it, and we're not doing it. The second thing is that in terms of our concerns about the global warming and the impact on the environment, I do know that the Environment Agency's got a big report coming in September about this whole issue. And one of the particular concerns we all have is the effluent infrastructure in and around the edge of Exeter and the Colne Valley. Not only that, but I am very concerned about the implications of higher water flows in those areas and runoffs from more concrete. That again means that we have an area which needs thorough study. I've noticed that somehow we've evolved from considering a separate extra town to now making it a direction of travel. I don't remember voting that way. I actually remember we voted to keep it in consideration in the plan, which is absolutely reasonable. Last but not least, I think that the town and parish presentations are a critical, important part of democracy. And we should have them, and we should have them in September and October when people are available to be there to listen. And that means to me that our mechanical crunching of all these situations, just so that we can get it all done before the next election, is detrimental to the residents of East Devon. We should properly consult, properly analyse, and properly put together the plan. If we don't do that, it's open to a considerable range of situations where both inspectors and judicial reviews will just hold everything up at a more expensive end of the whole process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. So, Ed, you will have captured quite a lot of that. In particular, Councillor Allen is wondering at which point in this process disability and access requirements are sort of introjected into our consideration. Also, those regarding the environment with specific reference to effluent. And I wonder if you might just comment on those two things, how we would expect those to be considered by this committee over the coming months and indeed years.
Yes, certainly, Chair. So members will recall that we went through the first draft of the local plan at the end of last year and into early this year. That included policies that addressed issues around care and disabled access and disability requirements in new homes, and set out some model policies for achieving that. Work has been going on through the local housing needs assessment to give us guidance in terms of what the requirements are in the district, in terms of the proportion of homes that need to be of particular design standards to meet those requirements. And members will recall we had a presentation from the consultants ORS matter a few weeks ago on the findings of the local housing needs assessment, which covered off those sorts of requirements. And as I say, members discussed the draft policies earlier in the year, so we've taken on board those comments, the advice that's coming out of the local housing needs assessment work, and are now updating those policies to ensure that they reflect members' wishes and the guidance of the consultants, so that we can bring back in October updated policies that achieve those requirements and deliver what we understand is needed in the district. So I think we have been addressing those issues and continue to do so. They're clearly very important, and we need to make sure they're incorporated into the plan. In terms of the effluents and water infrastructure issues, I think I reported at a previous meeting that we've commissioned consultants to undertake what's called a water cycle study, which looks at this holistically in terms of water infrastructure in the district and the requirements that arise from new development in the district, so that they can advise us on the impact on water and effluent infrastructure and what we need to do moving forward. And they will be liaising with South West Water and hopefully through the Commission challenging them where necessary in terms of some of the assumptions they may have made, so that we can have confidence moving forward that the infrastructure that's needed can and will be delivered in time. So that is in hand. Consultants Haskening, previously Royal Haskening, are undertaking that work for us at the moment, and it also forms part of work that's being undertaken on proposals for new towns in the west end of the district, is to consider the water infrastructure implications of those as well, very mindful of the issues being experienced in Cliff St Mary at the present time and in the past, and ensuring that we fully understand any implications for those issues through that work as well. So that is all being considered. Consultants with the relevant expertise have been appointed and will be advising us in due course to feed into this work, all in time for October and the draft plan being brought back to members. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, there was just one
Thank
quick...
you. Councillor Allen, would you come back? Yeah, please do.
Thank you. When we debated this issue of disability before, Mr. Freeman did refer to care homes and the disability criteria, but we didn't look at the domestic homes. And I think that what I would like to see is a specific comment and a policy for domestic dwellings with regard to disability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's noted. I'm aware there's a member who's got a difficulty, needs to leave quite soon. So I'm just going to go out of order. I'm going to go to Councillor Dan Ledger. I'm going to mix it up then with Mike Howe, whose hand I saw sprang up as soon as we were talking about water runoff and all the rest of it. So let's go to Councillor Dan Ledger, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Sorry, I've got an 11 o'clock with Devon County on a housing meeting. Just answer the questions in order. For A, yes, but I don't want to see small 1 or 2 dwelling sites that we have in previous meetings. I think we've agreed previously that we'd like to see all major sites come forward as site presenters. We want to be in a strategic, we want to be planning strategically, not just 1 or 2 sites. For B, separate, I'd be happy to take, if possible, to have a meeting at the end of July, if that's possible, to get site promoters in that time. I know that they were very keen, and we did it on quite a quick turnaround before. So if we do end up, fantastic. If not, September. With D, whichever's easiest, I'm really easy on that. And then lastly, I just wanted to cover off, just coming in what Councillor Allen was saying. There is in building regs, I think it's M4 or M2, it's one or the other, that is part of building regs and design. We could, as part of the work on housing needs, relate a specific percentage of housing development to be in any major site to be accessible to M4 building regulations. And we can put that as policy in our local plan. That's something that we can push through. We don't need to wait for government to mandate that. And then lastly, on the consultation, yes, I really want a full and frank consultation with members of the public, but we need to remember that we do need a 5-year land supply, and it is a retreating position that's dropping very quickly. I know that no member here wants to be on the receiving end of us losing our 5-year land supply. So whilst I do really want us to consult all of the public fully and frankly, we do need to get on with this as quickly as possible, and we need to reinstate that 5-year land supply as quickly as we can, so that it is in an increasing position rather than decreasing. Thank you, Chair. And
thanks, Councillor Ledger. Can I draw on your experience as having been portfolio holder for a couple of years? Given how you saw the previous presentations going from people advancing sites, what would because I know you're having to go at 11 and won't be able to formally propose this, but how would you see this working best spread in August and September with the likely people who want to come forward?
Exactly as you said, Chair, 10-minute presentations. The 15 minutes was too long before. 10 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes and 5 minutes, and get every site promoter to send their presentation ahead of time so that we can look at it and we can understand it. But I think it is key that we don't invite every single site developer, because there are a lot of sites that are 5, 6, 7 houses. We don't need to be seeing these. They're a lot smaller. We want to be seeing the ones that are 150 homes, large scale development with large scale infrastructure that they're going to put in across the district.
So on that, just to pick you up on that last, so on the smaller ones, what's your rationale for us not needing to see those? Is it because they're much simpler prospectuses really for officers to assess?
Exactly. I don't think there's that as much scrutiny you'd need. For instance, you wouldn't have as much scrutiny on a household application compared to a major application where you had 100 houses. It's where you dedicate your time. And I know that obviously the resources across both the committee for members and officers is finite. So we need to strike a balance. And I think that will be the fairest balance, that we only look at major applications coming forward.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Ledger, for your advice there. A good time with county in 8 minutes. Right. So I promised him, here he comes. Councillor Mike Howe, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, it's one of those days, isn't it? Because I want to agree with Councillor Allen, Councillor Bailey, and Councillor Ledger that's just left. Starting the reason why you just called me water, and I just hope it's a fraudulent slip on Mr. Freeman's terminology, but
I think you mean a Freudian slip, Mike, well, not a fraudulent slip.
Well,
clarifying
possibly,
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not having a go at Mr. Freeman at all, but from Exmouth to Clyst St Mary in particular, when new development comes, we need to know the water infrastructure, the sewage water infrastructure, is there before another house is erected. So we need to make sure we get this phased in the right way. The actual critical thing with water, and particularly the sewage and water, is that is delivered before more pressure is put on the overcapacity of what South West Water are already dealing with. So, as I say, it's just one of those things we need to be clear on that. Councillor Allen, absolutely. We need to cater in our normal housing stock about where we're going and how we're doing for those less able than others. And Councillor Ledger was absolutely right in what he was saying. I want to come back on why we are where we are, and I would happily support seeing every single developer we could and everything else, but the reality is we haven't got time. The reason we chose the middle ground is because those in the middle ground were only a few points away from being selected. And there was a bit of you could possibly argue about 1 or 2 points, but others are miles away. And really we shouldn't be considering, or unless they can show that the officer's report or scoring system is totally wrong, we are stuck where we are to a certain extent. We just haven't got the time. But as I say, maybe there should be a review somewhere of those developers that think the scoring is totally wrong and that actually their scoring is better and comes close to the actual, that line where over you're being recommended by officers to come through. But, Mr. Ledger, Councillor Ledger is quite right again. We need to deal with the bigger stuff. As much as we want to deal with the small stuff in our villages and everything else, we're stuck with the big stuff. We are in a dire situation and we need to get on and somehow move this forward. So I wish you all the best and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. I was going to add a postscript about water and sewage and the whole Cranbrook plan in the end, but anyway, that's water under the bridge, he punned appallingly. So let's come next, please, to Councillor Richard Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ed Freeman asked a pertinent question earlier, which nobody seems to have picked up on. Do we want site assessments before the owners or developers' presentations or after? Personally, I've given it a bit of thought. I think we could speed things up considerably if we had the site assessments before the presentations, because at least then we would know what we were dealing with. We would have the information. And, you know, for somebody like me, for example, who doesn't know what the sites around Exmouth are going to be like or whatever, it does give us a more of a fighting chance to understand where the owners and developers are coming from if we know something about the particular sites beforehand.
Thank you, Richard, for that very much. You know, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Chicken and egg. Ed, can I just come back to you just for some thought on that as well? From the perspective of the developer, you know, is that something, and presumably that's not something they could sort of complain about, that in a way, you know, that the jury was, you know, already decided prior to them having a chance, or would it be better to let them do a basic pitch? But then if, as Dan and everybody seems to be agreeing, we would want something in writing in any case beforehand from them at the very least. I don't know, how do we square that one, Ed?
Well, it's for you, Chairman. I mean, I think officers' assessment will obviously have been done without seeing any presentation necessarily from the developers. But equally, we should have all of the information to make that assessment anyway. I mean, I certainly think if members are wanting to sort of rationalise the sites that they're hearing presentations from based on officers' scoring, then obviously officers' assessments need to be published before to do that. So I would say in that scenario, we'd have to publish an agenda with officers' assessment of the sites that are being considered at a particular meeting. And then in the agenda, say, those with those sites that are, you know, considered to be a maybe or are assessed as unacceptable at this stage have the right to present and should register through these means or something. So I can see certain logic in having the site assessments beforehand from officers, particularly if members are looking to rationalise who they're hearing presentations from based on that scoring. If any rationalisation is simply based on the scale of the site, i.e. as Councillor Ledger was suggesting, and I think he was saying sort of significant major developments of sort of 100 dwellings or more, then obviously that can be done more in sequence with the site assessments being published, and we can contact the developers of those sites beforehand and say, do you wish to present, because it's a much smaller number and would be much easier to do it on that basis in a transparent way. So I think in some respects sequencing depends on if and how members want to rationalise who they're hearing presentations from, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Ed. That was a very full but not necessarily helpful answer. Damn. Richard, can I ask you what do you make of that? Having heard what Ed said, which way? What's your waters telling you? Because I'm just going to look. I'm trying to look at this from point of view of the public and perceived due process. Also, we don't want to look like developers' enemies. We're not. But on the other hand, we don't want to overindulge. I mean, how do we get through that?
Well, I saw it as being a means of, first of all, it would cut out a lot of time when we came to looking at the owners and developers' presentations, because we would understand what it was they were trying to do and what the surrounding area was like and how it scored and so on. It would also help to filter out those that are actually non-starters, because you know they no way will they come up to scrutiny when they start doing the presentations. But also, I don't think it's against the developers. I think it's going to be helpful for us to understand what it is the developers are trying to do. And I don't see it as being an anti thing at all. I think it'd be quite helpful for us to understand the landscape that they're actually planning to build these properties on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard, very much for that. We've got two more speakers at the moment, and what would be helpful is if we could go and have a look at the exam questions set for us on page 16 under 6.2. There are 4 basic questions that Ed's and the officers are looking for our steer on. So let's hear from Ollie and then Mike first. So Councillor Ollie Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I hope I'm going to address those questions. Firstly, I think it's important we don't have any time slippage on this, because I think it's important that we are ready for that autumn consultation. I think that's a good time to have a consultation. I think it's a time when people are likely to be around, and I wouldn't want to see slippage on that. Nobody's actually mentioned our staff in considering, August meetings, and I think it could put considerable pressure on Ed's staff, and I think he's alluded to it. If they have young families, children of school age, they are going to need to take their holidays in August. Personally, I avoid August for that very reason, but for other people, August may be their only option. So I think we need to bear that in mind as well, and I'm not in favour of having too many meetings. I would hope that we can get through the allocations for each town in one meeting, but if it turns out we need 2, then so be it. But I think that's just going to require a bit of discipline from us, and ensuring that we actually stick to the suggested sites, and not stray into extraneous matters that aren't actually on the agenda. And finally, I don't really see any point in hearing from developers on sites that officers have ruled out as not viable. We've already heard from Mr. Roberts that even sites have been ruled in. He has serious caveats about. So I think to hear from people with sites that really just aren't an option is just a waste of our time. But personally, I did find it quite useful last time to hear from developers about their plans and how those sites might be developed. It did feel sometimes like they were stressing all their green credentials, and you thought, how much of this is actually going to transpire? So I'd rather like the idea of seeing those plans beforehand, and then we can ask those really searching questions that might drill down a little bit into exactly how they see these sites developing, and particularly what the transport implications are. So I'd welcome that, but I'm not really in favour of packing August with meetings, because, Ed can perhaps comment on that, but I think it might not be fair on our staff, let alone availability of councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. So before we start trying to wrap this item up, let's come back to Councillor Mike Allen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I simply wanted to put a formal proposal into the meeting that we do in fact have a specific policy presented to us for the area of disability in domestic properties, and whether or not a certain proportion of the homes built should be either M2 or M4 standards in terms of building regulations. I just wanted to make sure. I get the feeling that that is a very much well accepted proposal, and I just hope we can bring it in to a final conclusion instead of hovering around it. So that's a formal proposal, please, Chair.
I would suggest that that's a very good idea, but Mike, can we have that on the agenda to do at our next meeting, because that then gives our officers time to just Otherwise, we're slightly improvising, aren't we, for something that's as important as that? Would you be happy if that was an item on the August meeting so we could address that properly?
I think that we have addressed it properly, and it's an issue that's been ducked. And I just want to make sure that all I'm asking is that we have a formal policy on the subject.
Okay, but that's slightly off today's agenda, isn't it, Councillor Allen?
Not when we've discussed it already, no.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm just going to say let's have that as an agenda item on August the 9th, and I think that's the best way forward for this matter. And if that's okay, it is not on the agenda today, and it doesn't naturally flow from this agenda item 7. I hope that's acceptable, Councillor. It is a commitment to bring it forward in August. Don't think it will make any difference to the outcome if we do it properly next month. Is that okay for you?
I think that's Chairman's prerogative to ignore my proposal.
It's Chairman's prerogative to advise you, Councillor Allen, that this isn't the right moment to bring forward that proposal. Otherwise, what happens with these? I mean, I could come up with something about, I tell you what, why shouldn't all houses in Colleton be painted pink henceforth? Because I've just, brought it up. And we must try and avoid improvisation and just do it in a disciplined way, if that's okay. So if we can bring that forward in August, is that okay for you, Councillor Allen?
I've already made a statement. I put a proposal on the table.
Yeah.
You haven't shown your willingness to listen to any seconders or debate it.
Well, I'm just saying, as a moderately experienced chair, I don't, with respect, I don't think you're doing this the right way. I'm very happy to accept now for the minutes, if you are, that we do debate this properly on August the 9th. Is that okay for you? From which I'm sure the exact same motion that you put forward can be voted on. Is that agreeable, Councillor Allen?
For the third time, I've already made my statement.
Okay. The thing about these committees is we just try and do them on the basis of, cooperation and all the rest of it. I tell you what, find a seconder if you wish. Is there a seconder for Councillor Allen's motion? Councillor Skinner, please. Oh, sorry, let me just come to Mr. Freeman first. I'm sorry, Ed, I hadn't seen your hand.
No problem, Chair. I just wanted to say that in terms of where we are in terms of the policy requirements for disabled requirements, new homes, we are looking to bring a policy which I think will do exactly what Councillor Allen is asking as part of the draft plan to your October meeting. So it is work that is in progress. It is happening. We are developing that policy, and it will be coming to you as part of the draft plan in October anyway. So hopefully that reassures.
Well, then, Chairman, there's really no need to vote because, in fact, that policy is coming forward. So if we're all agreed on that, can we just minute that?
Yeah, good. So that's duly minuted. Thank you very much. So we won't proceed on a vote on that. Won't Councillor Skinner, do you still want to come in?
I think now you've covered it all and everybody's happy, and let's crack on. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Right now, so we need to decide what we're going to do looking at these questions of A, B and C. Now, A was, does the committee want to extend the invitation to make presentations to all agents and landowners that are promoting land for development at the towns? And I think the feeling was that it would be for the larger projects, not the smaller ones. Forgive me if I'm paraphrasing that wrong. And that that's that question. So would anybody, Councillor Skinner, you have your hand up. Would you come in on that one as well?
Yes, lovely, thank you. And yes, and it's a relevant point. And my understanding is that we don't actually engage in any sites under 5 anyway. So that's correct, Ed, isn't it? It's not, we're not down to 1 or 2. And I think Councillor Ledger, he did make a good point. We're not here talking about the little 5 or 6 or 7. That's not really where we're at. We are at the bigger ones. But what I would like to discuss and just tease out at this point is, and I'm not sure how many are in it, Ed, but for some smaller towns, say 20, 25, might be a lot of housing for them. And I think that is worth sort of thinking about. But when we talk about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we're not into that. And we are a strategic planning committee. We're looking strategically. But for some numbers, say, I'm just picking a number out of the hat, 2025, that would be quite strategic for a smaller settlement, a slightly smaller settlement, slightly smaller town, for example. So I think the number, Chair, if you don't mind, it would be quite good to sort of pin down where that is. Secondly, the point that Councillor Lawrence made, which was an excellent point about if we get some information coming before us in front of where we're going, so as we can understand where they are and what they're going. And then, to be honest with you, we can read up on what's what. The presentation can be then, as you've suggested, fairly limited, and we get through a few in a bit of time instead of just starting from once upon a time and then discussing it, because we would have that sort of that info in front of us. So I think it's quite important to have some info come to us prior to the meetings. And I would like to pin down what numbers mean to some people, because it's all very well talking about 150 houses and all the rest of it. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily, it could be not the same as an effect on somebody putting 25, 30, 40 houses, for example, which is very strategic to them. That's where I'm at. I'm not up to discussing half a dozen houses and that sort of scenario. I don't think that really counts, really, to be fair. If I made my point well.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. I think what I'll just give you advance notice, Ed, and perhaps indeed Mrs. Shaw or anybody who's paying careful attention to this, if you're able in 5 or 6 minutes time to help us bring what seems to be a consensus together. It's not actually very easy to do it on A, B, C and D now I look at it more carefully. But let's continue to hear speakers. So Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you. It's difficult to talk about this in abstract, but well, you know what my views are on presentations, but what I'd like to hear from Ed, please, is there a natural cutoff in the number of houses? And, because we obviously don't want to have too many meetings for this. So how many sites are there? What's the range in houses? And is there a natural cutoff where we can say realistically, okay, anything below however many, 100, we don't bother with, and we only, or 50 or whatever it is. So it'd be helpful to have some guidance from him on that, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bailey, very much. Councillor Kevin Blakey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Skinner makes a very valid point that for some places, a handful of houses would be a significant development, and for others not. Could I suggest that we look at a limit being set on perhaps a percentage of the local housing stock and what effect a new development would have on it? Just off the top of my head, frankly, a figure of, say, 2% increase in the housing for any given town or parish might be a sensible number. For example, a town of 5,000 houses, that would be 100 new dwellings. For a town of 30,000, Exmouth, for example, you'd be looking at 6 times that number. You'd be looking at 600 houses as being the kind of numbers that would really need examination. Is that a sensible compromise? Would welcome Mr. Freeman's views on that. Thank you.
Okay, come back to you there. Not since Carol Vorderman was on Countdown have I seen mental maths achieved with such speed there. That was fantastic, that final calculation. Coming next, please, to Councillor Peter Faithfull.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in. I'm really concerned about, I think most people know I'm interested in affordable homes in rural communities, and that will mean small plots of land. I appreciate you don't want to be analysing every single plot, but surely there's a justification in addressing housing in rural communities as a strategy and a subject in its own right. So surely they should be looking at some sort of figure of housing by accumulating the small plots together to make up numbers. Otherwise, you're just missing out a huge chunk of potential housing. And there is clearly a need for small plots in small communities around the countryside in rural locations. So, to be totally ignoring it is, speaking to individual sites is one thing, and I'm not sure we should be doing that, but it shouldn't be ignored and it should be properly recognised as a subject in its own right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Faith. I'm sure Mr. Freeman will pick that up at the moment. I do agree with what you're saying. I think it's already being, well, I know it's already being actively considered. And the problem, which you're identifying as well, is finding the sites. So I'm a director of a community land trust over here in Collerton and Collerford, and we just can't find anywhere for an exception site, despite all the will in the world and all of the infrastructure we put in place to do it. But it is critical. I quite agree. Councillor Ollie Davey, please, next.
Thanks, Chair. I think we've got to bear in mind this is a strategic planning committee, and while those smaller sites may be of significance to the developers, that's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with what we see as strategic. So I think it's the major sites that we need to look at. And I take Councillor Faithfull's point, but simply by not putting every single small site in the local plan doesn't rule them out. All of this has got to go through planning anyway and be subjected to rigorous scrutiny there. So there's nothing preventing smaller sites in villages. I'm very keen on those. I want to see villages able to thrive and develop. And there's nothing to prevent that simply because we haven't made an allocation in the local plan. In fact, it may not be a good idea to highlight certain areas as being the favoured sites for development when local people may not want that, and they may want allocations in a different place. So I think we will be getting down into an awful lot of detail if we start doing that. So I think we need to ensure that we're focusing on those major strategic allocations. Impressed as I am by Councillor Blakey's maths, the percentage thing doesn't really work for me because to only consider allocations of 600 houses, say in Exmouth, would be far too great. I want to be looking at the allocations of 50 plus. So I wouldn't want to go down the percentage route either.
Okay, thank you very much. Coming to Councillor Howe in just a second. I think in a moment what I'd like to do, we do have these 3 recommendations. I'd like us to take votes on 1 and 2 as soon as possible, please, and then just give us that extra bit of thinking space to come back and see what Ed has managed to capture from our thoughts around 3. But coming to Mike Howe finally, please, before we go to a vote.
Thank you very much. It was just a quick one because of what Councillor Davey and Councillor Faithfull said before. I want to pick up on Councillor Davies' point, and I need to be clear about what point he was making. Because if the local plan doesn't have an allocation, large or small, or a policy to back up a allocation or a planning permission of future of land in our smaller villages, etc., 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 the likelihood of them getting through is almost near 0 unless they come to as an exception site. That, to me, doesn't work through our rural communities. They need housing, small amounts, and in keeping with the current developments and everything else. But our local plan can't be a blanket no to them, if you get my meaning. So I just want to be clear about that, and we need to understand that going forward with our policies. And I know we got some, but I'm not very happy with them, etc., etc., etc. Coming up to the chair's point, I'd be happy to take 1 and 2. I'm stuck, because as much as I'd love to sit here for days on end listening to all these developers, that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but for fairness sake, it would be days on end. I don't think we've got the time. It's just how we limit those to the sensible discussions, as I say, in my view, around the edges that are got a fighting chance or have got a fighting chance of being dropped out as well as being put in, shall we say. But how we do that, and Mr. Freeman's the only one with the numbers, so it'd be good to hear those numbers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Can I ask, is that a proposal from you that we agree to recommendations 1 and 2 at this stage?
I'll go for that, yes. Let's give us something to hang our hands on.
Thank you. Would anybody care to second that at this stage, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Okay, in which case, can we go to a vote on that one, on those two, please, taken on block, Wendy, and then we'll come back for further discussion on recommendation 3 in just a second.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, the recommendations you have are that Strategic Planning Committee note the contents of the report, and that Strategic Planning Committee recommend endorsement of the proposed timetables for bringing officer assessments of potential development sites to committee as set out in section 4 of the report. Please press your green tick if you're in support of that recommendation, press your red cross if you're against the recommendation, or raise your electronic hand if you're indicating you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. I have 9 votes in support, so that is carried.
Thank you, committee. Thank you very much, Mrs. Shaw, for taking us through that. Okay, so Ed, can you, have you had time to think? What are your takeaways at the moment on 3? Because there does seem to be some sort of consensus around this, which is we ought to do this, but not too much of it. We mustn't delay the process at all. We don't need to hear from the tiddlers, but I don't know. What can you suggest, please?
So I think in terms of question A, which I think is the big one in terms of presentations, I think my suggestion would be the best way to rationalise the number of sites you're hearing from, bearing in mind that we've got well over 500 sites in the mix here. I think someone said previously about only hearing from those sites where officers are proposing that they should be allocated or they are a maybe, and not, I think this was Councillor Davey, and not hearing presentations from sites that officers are ruling out as unacceptable in planning terms. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that would be a worthwhile means of reducing the number of presentations, and which would eliminate quite a number, I suspect.
So Ed, can I just do a straw poll then from members before we go to any vote on that? Does what Ed's just suggested sound, or if anybody who thinks that sounds like a grotesque idea, can you put your hands up, please, at this stage? Unless you feel that what Ed's saying is. Councillor Skinner.
I don't know if I'll quite use the word grotesque idea, because that's not exactly, but I get where you're coming from. It's just that if with over 500 sites, obviously that's unachievable. That's absolutely correct. And I don't think anybody will argue with that point. The only point where we are is that the ones that are relatively acceptable are the ones that are nearly acceptable, which is a sort of guidance that I was picking up from Ed. But I'm not sure where those parameters sort of start and end. So if I might, and this is really difficult, and I'm sorry to put this on you, Ed, if I were to say to you out of 500, if you stuck with the more or less acceptable and the ones that might nearly be acceptable, you go from 500 to what?
I genuinely don't know off the top of my head. Sorry, but my thinking is that there's not necessarily much point members hearing presentations on sites that officers are saying are fundamentally unacceptable. They might be in a flood zone 3, or they might cause significant harm to setting of a listed building or something. I question whether or not there's merit in members hearing from those sites, essentially. But those that we think are acceptable or we think could be acceptable, there seems to be some logic in members hearing presentations from those to help them to determine whether or not they should be included in the plan.
Could I add to that, Chair, if I may, for you, Chair? I do have a path of travel which I'm trying to get down, which is where we need to be. I've always been a big believer that in business, I've always put myself into the position, leave as many options open as you possibly can, because you never quite know what's coming down the road. So don't shut the tap off to just about everything. I absolutely understand, Ed, the things that you've said, saying if they're in a flood zone 3 and if they're these ones that have really got no chance, then let's say that would be way away from. We really, Chair, through you, we don't really need to be hearing them. I wouldn't have thought. I would have thought we would all agree that we wouldn't be supporting them anyway, and that just takes up time. But where we get to with the ones that don't quite come in or do is somebody suggested earlier about the 5-year housing land supply and where we are with that. There may very well be some sites that aren't preferable, but actually you never quite know that ones you thought were preferable aren't going to be preferable now, because for one reason or another the sand changes and we drop off some sites. I want to be in a position whereby we've got plenty of options. We need to be fair play with all those people that come forward with the plenty of options, but at the same time we don't want to be listening to those that have actually got really no chance at all, and that's what we want to do. So it's those that are nearly on the edge. I wanted to stretch, if you don't mind, Chair, a little bit wider than that, so as we're not curtailing ourselves to a point that we get into a difficult position for whatever comes down the road. So it's that balance, really, Ed, is what I'm saying to you, is that when we draw down by saying we're going to take a vote now on those that are nearly going to go over and those that don't quite make it, but we think they might be able to with a bit of, it's that one that really we need to open up just a little bit wider to give us flexibility that, oops, if we did need it, we may need it. But the ones that have got no chance, we don't want to. Am I making my sort of self clear, really?
No, absolutely loud and clear. And I would say on that, of course, those sites which under Ed and his team's assessment don't meet those criteria, otherwise they've been allocated or they're kind of maybes, those that aren't currently in the first team, so to speak, they will of course have their chance, moving ahead. And I do think we do need to, in some way, take officer guidance and reduce the load that we're seeing. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
This is what I would do. I would say, how much time does this committee want to spend listening to developer presentations, bearing in mind we've only got one meeting to talk about all of our sites coming forward for our towns in whenever it is, August. So I would say, how much time have we got? Divide it into 10-minute slots and then allocate it. And I'd be happy, I think, to delegate it to the officers to allocate or decide which are the most appropriate sites for us to consider, ruling out the ones that are completely impractical, looking at which are the biggest and most strategic sites, because otherwise we're going round and round and round. We don't want to spend meeting after meeting after meeting. We've hardly got any time as a committee to talk about really, really important sites. And I have to say, fine, bring the developers along to talk to us, but nothing they say is binding, so they can give any commitment in those meetings. It doesn't necessarily translate into that's what's going to happen. So I think we're in danger of spending far too much time discussing which sites. We've got much, really, really significant discussions to be having as a committee. And I think we just need to kind of put a lid on this, decide how much time, and then, move forward quickly, please. Thank you.
So, Councillor Bailey, what I'm hearing from you there is that you agree with what Mr. Freeman is saying, that we only hear from those that are allocated or maybes, and that Mr. Freeman is kind enough, perhaps, who knows, in consultation with the portfolio holder, to look at the realities of that within the amount of committee time we've got as divided by the number of people there are there, and that we then apply a further process, perhaps even of elimination, if it's not within officer and committee capacity. Is that kind of what you're saying there? I think you're on mute, Councillor Bailey.
Yes, I was just nodding.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Ed. So on A, how far do we feel we've got there, or Ed and Mrs. Shaw? Are we nearing a point where we've got a recommendation emerging from that?
I do have a suggestion, Chair.
Thank you.
That taking the wording from 6.2.a, that members are asked to give a straw poll on whether to extend the invitation to make presentations to agents and landowners as assessed by officers in consultation with the chair and vice chair. I don't know whether that would assist, and then officers can assess, and you and the vice chair could further have an input into which ones you consider are more appropriate or not appropriate.
Well, that does seem to make sense. Given that the minutes today will have captured the commentary as well. So, okay, then I'm just going to ruthlessly, for sake of our time today, propose what Mrs. Shaw has just said from the chair, but coming to Councillor Young and then Councillor Howe, please, if we can just address us, Ed, taking us through A, B, C and D.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just thinking about a safety net for the sites that are dropped. I presume they're going to be going on to the live map that they are sites that have been eliminated. So when we get to the consultation stage with the parishes, they might pick up, well, this site and this site actually will work together, and they might come back at that stage. So there's that safety net there that we're not chucking them out and putting them in the bin. We're putting them to one side and putting them on the map as saying discarded at this time. Hope that helps.
That's very helpful, Councillor Young. Thank you. So we'll note that comment. Thank you very much. Councillor Howe, please.
Thank you. And no go at you or the vice chair in what I'm just about to say, but I need to say something. I've got no problem with what you're proposing, but I would like some documentation to say the ones you've not chosen to go forward, if you get my meaning. For transparency's sakes, nothing else. We just need we need certainty one way and another. That's all I can say on that. Thank you.
Okay. Ed, is that something we're happy to say that we can provide to the committee?
Through Chair, I think I'm happy with that. I suppose there's the question in my mind of who we're actually inviting to present in the first place. And it seems to me, it would be logical to me if we're inviting those that are potential allocations or maybes, as suggested, and within the town's only major developments, i.e. those of 10 dwellings or more. And then if it needs further reduction from there, then the delegated powers and the discussion with yourself and the vice chair come in to weed it out from there. But I think if we're only inviting those that are proposed allocations or maybes and a sites of 10 or more dwellings in the towns, I think in the villages we wouldn't apply that threshold, but in the towns I think it's reasonable. Then I'd be fairly confident that the numbers would be manageable anyway, given the number of sites you've already heard from, which I assume members don't want to hear from again. So taking that into account, I think the numbers would be manageable anyway, and then the delegated powers referred to is just a fallback fundamentally.
Okay, thank you. If you could capture that, Mrs. Shaw, please, as what Mr. Freeman's just said. Sorry to keep you scribbling all the time. Councillor Bailey, please.
When do we think, dare I ask, that this will happen? In August or a beginning of August?
I think I'm guessing Ed's going to come to that as you're running ahead. Ed, aren't you?
It's a later question, isn't it, Chair?
It is. No, Councillor Bailey, keen as ever to get to the final paper. No, you're gonna one page at a time. Okay, right. So I feel thank you, Ed, and everybody for the work on A. So coming back to you then, Ed, going back through page 16. And B.
Sorry, Chair, did you want me to move on to B?
Yes, sorry, yes.
So, So my understanding from the discussion is the answer to B is yes, members did wish to hear presentations at the same committee meeting at which officers' site assessments are heard. So essentially the site assessment would be published in the agenda papers, which you'd receive whatever it is 10 days before the meeting, and then at that meeting you would hear presentations on those sites in the agenda.
Committee, any violent objection to what Mr. Freeman has just put forward there? I can see nothing there. Thanks, Ed. C.
So my understanding from the discussion that members were happy to go ahead with the scheduled August committee meeting, which I think we concluded was on the 9th of August, but there was reluctance to further meetings in August. So my understanding would be we go ahead with the 9th of August meeting and we pack as much of the town's work into that meeting as we can, and then pick up the rest in extra meetings through September.
I think that's what I understood. Committee, anybody disagree with what's being said there? No, thank you very much. And finally to D, Ed.
I think the answer to this is yes. Effectively, you would have the officers' assessment and the presentations alongside each other. So if we were doing Exmouth, for example, in the first meeting as the largest settlement, you would have officers' assessment and the presentations for Exmouth alongside each other at that same meeting, and likewise the other settlements moving down the settlement hierarchy.
Okay, again, committee, does that make sense to all of you? Anybody take greater exception to it? No. Okay, lovely, thanks. Oh, Councillor Bailey, please.
It's just a question. Are there people that wanted to do presentations that haven't been able to do them from the last round of presentations, which under these criteria could now come forward?
Ed?
I'd have to go back and check, to be honest. I'm not sure.
Don't worry, that's okay.
But we will try and contact and pacify anyone who's not who wanted to present last time and is still not able to. But I think off the top of my head, they should be able to. Right,
now I'm coming. She knows I'm coming her direction. Mrs. Shaw, have you managed to combine some paragraph? I know. Go on then. What have we got?
Yes, recommendation 3 that the committee. Oh, hang on. Let me find my piece of paper. Yes, that Strategic Planning Committee make recommendations about how and when they'd like to hear presentations from developers and site promoters in relation to all possible allocations and maybe allocations and 10 dwellings or more in towns to be invited to make presentations, and where outside this will be as assessed by officers in consultation with the chair and vice chair. I hope that is as per Ed's comments. In relation to hearing presentations at the same committee meetings with officers' site assessments are heard, then yes, they wish to. And as our committee, yes, committee are happy to have the town-based presentations at the scheduled August committee, and any extra committee meetings are to be held in September. And D, yes, committee wish to have a series of meetings where they consider officer assessment on 1 or 2 towns only, and then agents and developers presentations for site at all those towns at the same meetings.
Councillor Bailey, please. Thank you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you. So if the threshold of 10 houses applies to towns, does any minimum threshold apply to villages?
Through you, Chair, that would be my suggestion, yes, which then I think picks up on the point others were making that in the villages it's much more likely to be smaller sites, and therefore it's important that members are aware of those and hear presentations on them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, I believe I understood everything that Mrs. Shaw said there, and I'm certain that she will be able to draft that into an even more elegant motion for us on recommendation 3. Councillor Davey, please.
Could I just suggest, Mrs. Shaw, maybe not all possible sites, because that just sounded as though it might be ambiguous. Maybe all officer recommended sites or something like that, and something like borderline sites. I got a bit nervous at the thought of all possible sites.
I think I misread all proposed sites.
Oh, well,
that was my handwriting, my scribble.
Fine.
Right, that deals with that point. In which case, committee, are you happy? If anybody's not happy to go to a vote on that now, please put your hand up. In case, Councillor Skinner, over to you, please.
No, sorry, I was making a point. I was going to make a point earlier, but I don't have a problem with all possible sites, to be honest with you, because it was going through that due process. But anyway, we sort of moved on, and it sort of got to the same place, and my hand didn't come down quick enough. I do apologise. We're done. Move on. That's right, Chair.
Councillor Skinner, are you happy to propose what's just been?
Fine. Yeah, fine. No problem.
Thank you very much. Anybody like to second that?
I'll second, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Lawrence, he moved like Greek lightning there. Yeah, no. So, Councillor Lawrence, thank you very much, Councillor Skinner and Lawrence.
Yep.
Mrs. Shaw, can you take us to a vote on that now, please?
Yes, Chair. Members, please press your green tick if you're in support of that recommendation. Press your red cross if you're against the recommendation, or raise your electronic hand to indicate you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you, members. So we have 8 votes in support, so that is carried.
Thank you very much indeed, officers and members, for that. It was a really helpful debate, and really sets another little bit of the route map. Now, my sense is that probably with one agenda item remaining, we can achieve this one in the next 20 minutes, unless anybody thinks we can't. I would propose to just crack on then. So we go to agenda item 8 now, the Beer, Quarry and Caves Special Area of Conservation Guidance Document, pages 18 to 55, and over to Ed Freeman, please, to present his report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report relates to a guidance document on the Beer, Quarry and Caves Special Area of Conservation, which has been produced by Natural England, the East Devon AONB team and Devon County Council as a guidance note about how we deal with habitat regulations issues at this protected habitat, which members will be aware of is a bit of a hotbed for bat activity in the district, and home to a number of important species of bats, some of which are very rare. The guidance is designed to enable applicants, and in particular their ecologists, to understand the work that's needed to be undertaken in terms of habitats regulations assessments, and to guide the development management team in their assessment of that work. So effectively, members will be aware that it's very important that we undertake this work correctly and in accordance with the legislation as a responsible authority under the habitat regulations assessments, and only grant developments where we're satisfied that there would be no significant effect on the integrity and importance of the habitat. So we found it's important to have this guidance that takes into account the complexity of this particular habitat, which is not just about the quarry and caves themselves, but also about a number of associated roosts in the surrounding area, sustenance zones and landscape connectivity routes, where the bats obviously travel away from the caves and the quarry through their activities in terms of foraging and roosts away from the main habitat. And the guidance helps to explain that activity, the evidence that's all based on, and therefore the work that needs to be done to fully understand the impact of developments through the development management process. So the intention is that the guidance be adopted and posted on our website in due course, following training of officers to ensure that they fully understand and can guide applicants on this work before it's fully implemented. Obviously, it's a very technical document, so I've invited Rory Chanter, our district ecologist, to the meeting, who's sat there in the background if members have any detailed questions on the document itself, and obviously a good opportunity for members to be introduced to Rory. I'm not sure if that's happened previously, but Rory joined us in January and is a very welcome addition to the team, providing detailed ecological advice on these issues and those within other protected habitats and elsewhere within the district as well. So the recommendation is that members adopt the guidance document, and that this be endorsed and used to inform decision making within planning proposals and habitat regulations assessments, and that the guidance be published on the council's websites. Thank you, Chair.
Many thanks for that, Ed. And as you say, fantastic news. Well, it's earlier in the year, but a really great welcome to our newish district ecologist, Rory. Thank you for being here today as well. I don't know if, oh, look, a sea of hands has gone up straight away. So now I'll ask for any members from outside of committee who'd like to indicate if they'd like to speak first, please. There's nobody there. So Councillor Mike Howe, please.
Well, I was wondering if we're going to hear from Rory, but at the same time, this is a wonderful document. It's great to see this done, and actually the map that shows the area covered for this new policy is really quite startling and positive. Having dealt with numerous issues over bats as my chair of planning for many years, it's good to see some forward thinking and some forward action. So I'm wholeheartedly commend this and move that we accept the recommendation wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe, for that very much. Coming back outside committee to Councillor Marianne Rickson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking that bats such as Barbastelle and Beckstein favour ancient woodlands such as oak and ash trees? And I think this highlights the importance of TPOs and protecting our ancient woodland in the area, because without this, there's going to be severe trouble. But of course, we also have the problem of ash dieback and loss of habitat from that as well. Thanks,
Councillor Rickson. I might just ask in a minute for Rory may want to come in on that and just sort of give us some of his bat knowledge. So Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Rory, very much for this document, which of course I fully support. What I'd also really like to see, and I've been kind of going on about this for a while before your time, is really clear guidance for all applicants, all planning applications, screening, so that people are really clear on what surveys they need to do and when they need to do them, because I'm really concerned about the protected species across the district, and people, you know, maybe not understanding when they need to do a survey, what kind of survey they need to do, and I know that other authorities do have guidance on their website, so it would be great if we could have so that we know there's a really consistent approach within our approachment to development management to protected species, in particular bats. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Ollie Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been away on holiday, actually, and one of the highlights of my holiday was sitting outside a tent and waiting for the bats to come out. Only a couple of them, and I can remember seeing dozens of bats when I was young. So I think it's really important that we protect what we've got left, and it's always a privilege seeing bats, and I would like to think that my grandchildren will also be able to enjoy that. I think looking at the maps, and Councillor Howard's right, it's a big area that we're looking at, and I noticed the pinch points that have been identified, and I think that's absolutely crucial, that we ensure that those are kept open, and I think that's a really significant contribution to looking at that and sort of being aware that just a bit of development there would be enough to possibly make those habitats inaccessible. And it also highlights the importance of woodland and hedgerows, as has been alluded to. And I mean, obviously we think of development as house building, but farming is also often development. And I don't know if Rory knows what protection there is for woodland and hedgerows if they're not actually going to be developed for housing. What kind of protection are we able to give those?
Thanks very much, Ollie, for that. Yes, I'd like to come over to Rory in a second as well. The pinch points on the maps are actually in my ward, so they are between the settlements of Collerton, Colliford, and Seaton. And I'm going in about 2 hours to a meeting with a presentation of a large potential development exactly in that area. So that's going to be interesting, where green wedge issues and pinch point issues come in. I don't know if Rory will know the answer to this, but so Rory or Ed, and then back to Rory for some more of the ecological detail. But what status within our local plan will identifying protecting these pinch points have when we come to, consider planning applications or future allocations?
So if I pick up on that to start with, and then I'll let Rory pick up the technical stuff. But I mean, in terms of status, this document, it's not going to be as adopted supplementary planning document or anything. We haven't followed that full process. It is simply hopefully through endorsement by the committee. We can refer to it as guidance for applicants and their ecologists to follow and refer to it in our decisions. But its status is very much just as guidance. I mean, one thing we could look at through the new local plan is having specific policies, a more specific policy perhaps for beer quarry caves, that looks at the designation of some of these areas. I don't know if Rory's had any discussions with the team about that, but it's certainly an idea we can take away and have a look into. Rory, over to you if you want to say anything further on that one.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, it's lovely to meet you all. Thanks for having me. Yeah, a few good points there, and yeah, really nice to hear quite a positive reception of it, to be honest. I was expecting more grilling, but maybe that's to come later. Yeah, I think I'll just go through it sort of in order of those points that have been raised by various councillors. It is quite a large area, which is good in some ways. It could be seen as quite threatening potentially to developers. It's not, in essence. Certain, as Ed alluded to, there's certain areas which are key sort of sustenance areas within that larger area, and then that larger area is a landscape connectivity zone. So it's about how HRAs apply within that zone is actually different in certain areas. So it's a good thing to have it all covered, but it's not quite as daunting as it may seem, if that's any sort of concern that is out there. About TPO protection, dieback, which I think Councillor Richardson mentioned, outside of any sort of planning obligation. So yes, Barbastels and Becksteins do use woodland, and Becksteins are associated with the SAC, so are a direct consideration in HRA within this consultation zone. So where Becksteins are concerned with ancient woodland and woodland within this consultation zone, there is a higher level of protection there afforded by merit of the HRA process, which is a nice thing to have. Barbastels specifically aren't, but the habitat in itself will be protected through the HRA process. So in essence, they will be protected just as a sort of side product of that. And I think another mention there from Councillor Davey, I think, was about, again, TPO and protection of trees outside of planning. This is something which is quite interesting. It's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. It's being looked into by the Woodland Trust, who are trying to lobby for better policy protection of trees and woodland outside of the planning process and on a landscape scale. It's obviously not something that EDDC have something to do with in any sort of meaningful way, but we are sort of keeping a keen eye on that and how it may tie into policy protection, the emerging local plan. But it's very early days at the minute. I know they've been asking for sort of, for officer time from various different LPAs to get a sort of idea on how trees could be better protected outside of the planning process, where the sort of loopholes are and what developers, etc., may seek to exploit potentially. So that's sort of working on the back burner, that one. The pinch points are very important also, and they are being taken into consideration during the local plan allocation process. So the general acceptability of whether or not you could develop within these sites. We're quite lucky with this guidance in some ways, in that there are a lot of similar guidance documents to do with SACs and BATs in the Southwest, and there's a lot of good precedents set by those documents, particularly allocation work, especially with the South Hams BAT SAC. So we got some good sort of precedents there which we can apply, and a good understanding of what is and isn't acceptable from a HRA standpoint in terms of what Natural England may or may not accept within pinch points. So it's very early days at the minute, but the short answer, I suppose, is that yes, it will be considered during the allocation process, and is already being considered. I think, and Councillor Bailey as well. Yeah, thank you for your comments on the sort of screening guidance and triggers and updating various bits of information on the website, which is, yeah, sort of separate from this, but I can assure you it will be getting done at some point. It's a big one on my list personally, because certain other LPAs, coming from a consultancy background, you see a lot of different LPAs websites and how they deal with these issues, and how sort of standardized the trigger process is for whether or not surveys are required, and how clear that can be on the website. And yeah, I think we're going to look into updating the website essentially and providing these trigger lists, these kind of things. But again, very early days at the moment for that.
Thanks, Rory. Fantastic contribution there. Thank you so much. Coming back to Councillor Jeff Young, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would love to support a policy that protects these pinch points. There's no point in building a whole estate and then realising that we've spoilt the flight path of these bats. So now I would like to see it within the local plan that these pinch points are protected. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Young. We'll note that for today. Absolutely, thank you very much. Coming back, I think, last time to Councillor Jess Beattie, please.
Just to endorse what Councillor Young said, because I think it's important to be more, guidance is great, but we don't want it to be overridden. So yes, please, in the local plan. Thank you.
Okay, so Ed, you'll have noted that with the challenges it may present as well, but let's bring that forward if we can. Thank you very much. Right, committee officers, absolutely excellent. As was said, we have a simple recommendation. Well, I'll come to Mrs. Shaw to read that again for us. Mrs.
I have a note that Councillor Howe moved this. I don't have a note of a seconder, unless I just missed it.
No, I don't think I asked for one. I do apologise. Who's fastest reflexes with the yellow hand? Come on.
Didn't Councillor Lawrence have his hand up?
No, that was the previous one, I think.
Oh, was it? Oh, I'm struggling to keep up here.
Councillor Lawrence.
Councillor Blakey has put his hand up.
Councillor Blakey. I do just need to check with Councillor Lawrence. You hadn't seconded this one, had you, Richard? It was the previous.
No, it was the previous one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Blakey. Okay, all right. Ah, dear. Right. So, yes, back to you, please, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. Your recommendation is that the Beer Quarry and Cave Special Area of Conservation, that consultation zones guidance, be endorsed and used to inform decision making within planning proposals and habitat regulations assessments, and that the guidance be published on the Council's website. Please press your green tick if you're in support of the recommendation, press your red cross if you're against the recommendation, or raise your electronic hand to indicate you're abstaining.
Thank you, members. Okay, we have 8 votes in support, so that is carried.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Shaw, and Wendy as well for that. Right, committee. Thank you. That was a really productive, helpful meeting. I hope you all felt heard from. Your views today were very much valued, so thank you for that. That brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. And can I please remind members that until the DSOs tell us that we're off air, we're on air, and you can still be seen and heard. Thank you.